Hi friends, I'm back. I know you've missed videos from me, so I'm here. Let's go. Starting our development unit. Like I said, we're going to start all the way in the womb with prenatal development and then newborn development. So let's go ahead and get started. We have our learning targets here. You can see that there's not as many learning targets, so we don't need to spend as much time on this portion. But in order to have a baby, we've got to have conception, right? And so I think we're probably pretty familiar with this. This is something that we probably already know, but I want to cover it really quickly. Obviously, this is when you have your two reproductive parts. You have the sperm and the egg. The egg gets fertilized from the sperm. Just something that you might not know, but women are born with all of their eggs that they'll ever have. And then like the older you get, the less that you have until you get to a point where you're not able to have children anymore. However, men begin producing sperm at puberty and then they can produce it for the rest of their lives. So this is why you can kind of see sometimes that old guy married to that super young girl. So someone might, like some 80-year-old might have a baby because sperm for men they don't lose it at some point, like how women run out of eggs. That new fertilized egg is going to contain 23 pairs of chromosomes, one from the mother, one from the father. They get paired together. Each chromosome contains thousands of genes, either individually or in combination with each other. And then obviously these genes produce particular characteristics in each person. And so this is why each person is different. Okay, so our genes are composed of sequences of DNA. Some genes are responsible for the development of systems common in all humans. So heart, circulatory system, the brain, the lungs, everyone has those, right? You've got to have those parts to be a human, while others control characteristics that make each human unique. So you can have a unique eye color, height, facial features, etc. Some people are taller or shorter. Some people have blue eyes or green eyes. All of that fun stuff. And then your biological sex is also determined by a combination of genes. So they do a lot of things. So all of that was probably review for you. You've either learned it in a science class in the past or when we talked about it in our biological unit. So this is going to get into some of the stuff that you might not know because we're talking now specifically about prenatal development. Okay, so every time we say prenatal, we're talking about in the womb. So it's going to go through 3 different stages. You have the zygote stage. This is the fertilized egg that we just talked about. This is right here at the beginning of the pregnancy. Fewer than 1/2 survive in the first 2 weeks, right? So this would be the period that you could potentially be pregnant. You don't know that you're pregnant, and it's a big possibility that you could be and it doesn't survive, and then you don't ever know. However, once you do pass through that zygote stage, you have the embryonic stage. This is weeks 2 through 8. This is when the zygote becomes an embryo. And by 4 weeks, so that's like 1 month, the embryo has developed a beating heart. It's starting to develop a brain, intestinal tract. These are some of the most like primitive organs, but they can be recognized. So most of the time, I feel like around 4 or 5 weeks, this is when someone might figure out that they are pregnant. And so by this point, the baby inside already has a beating heart. Okay, and then by 8 weeks, the embryo is about 1 inch long, has arms, legs, a face that are distinct. So you can actually start seeing these features as early as 2 months or 8 weeks. Okay, so we have some pictures here for you. If you've never seen kind of what a baby looks like in the womb, but you have fertilization. Okay, so this is right at the beginning of conception. You could see a picture of that. You have a picture at 4 weeks and then at 8 weeks. Looks a little different than you might think. Some of us I know have probably seen pictures like this before. Some of us haven't, maybe if you're just not exposed to it. But you can clearly see at 8 weeks, like we said, you can see the arms and the legs. You can really start to see some of those features that we're familiar with. Okay, and then the last stage, this is the longest. This is from 8 weeks to birth. Okay, rude. Okay, at 8 or 9 weeks, now the term is fetus, right? And I feel like this might be the most common one that you hear. So around 4 months, fetal movement is strong enough to be detected by the mother. So this is where the mother could feel the baby moving around, maybe a kick. Around 6 months, eyelids begin to open. The fetus has well-developed grasp and taste buds. So you can see that a lot of things are developing here. And then the fetus is going to reach the age of viability, or the point in which it can survive if born prematurely. And that's around 24 weeks. Okay, so it is possible if for some reason a baby has to be born so early, around 24 weeks, that they can survive. It's about 50%. And then obviously, the longer that you go, the percentage each week increases. A fetus can continue to grow and gain weight during the last 2 months. At the end of a normal 38-week pregnancy, usually on average, obviously it varies, but on average, if it's, an average normal pregnancy, the fetus is going to weigh around 7 pounds, 20 inches in length at about 38 weeks. So obviously, if you go a little bit longer, it can be a bigger baby, weigh more, be longer. If you go shorter than that, the length is really going to determine the size. Sometimes during prenatal development, there can be certain defects that happen, and one of the causes of that can be genetics. Okay, so this would just be genetic factors that cause defects, right? Due to some sort of issue with the genes or the chromosomes. So, okay, one of these can be phenylketonuria. This is the inability to break down protein. Now, that might not seem significant to you, but what it can cause later on, if not treated, is brain defects, mental retardation, seizures, and just different things like that. Tay-Sachs disease is another one. This is the body's inability to break down fat, which could cause substance to build up and destroy the brain and nerve cells until the nervous system just eventually shuts down. Babies start showing signs of these diseases around 4 to 6 months old. And so both of these are very rare. And the United States actually does screen for PKU. But it is still something that can happen, and it's just due to genetic factors. At this point, there's nothing that the mom did wrong here. The baby or the child has one of these diseases. They usually die around age 5. If parents both carry genetic defects, the child is 1 in 4. They have a 1 in 4 chance of being born with the disease. So you can get screened for these things. It seems to occur most frequently in Central and Eastern European Jews. So think about the Jewish population that's already small, and you look at a specific group of people that makes it even smaller. So that's why these diseases would be considered very rare. Down syndrome is also one that has a genetic influence. Okay, so when we're looking specifically at Down syndrome, this occurs when the zygote receives an extra chromosome from the moment of conception. So we said that they have 23. It's an equal pair from the mother and father. So in this case, they would receive an extra. This causes intellectual disability, usually on a mild to moderate range, so not extreme intellectual disability. Often relates to a mother's age. So if the mom is pregnant at age 35 or older, usually they want to do a little bit more testing because this is more common in older women having babies. There are characteristics that make Down syndrome more noticeable facial features wise. So we have, the upward slanted eyes, smaller nose, ear and mouth, sometimes smaller hands and shorter neck. So there's very distinct facial features with Down syndrome. And then usually that's not the only issue. There's accompanied other health problems like heart, vision, or hearing, there's something else also going on with it. Okay, so those were all genetic factors. However, there are also environmental factors. So anything that is like an environmental agent that causes issues, we call that a teratogen. So like I said, drugs, chemicals, viruses, or other factors that can produce birth defects. We have a couple examples. So we could have some sort of illness with the mother, like rubella, that can cause blindness, deafness, heart abnormalities, and stillbirth. Syphilis can cause mental retardation, physical deformities, and a miscarriage for the mother. AIDS can be passed on to the child prior to birth. So these are just 3 examples of illnesses. Obviously, it gets into drugs, right? Illegal drugs like cocaine can result in the baby being born addicted to that drug. It's not just cocaine, right? We see this with heroin also. Even some legal drugs can cause fetal abnormality. So we always want to be checking with the doctor to make sure anything that you're taking is okay to be taking while pregnant. Alcohol and nicotine use, these can cause issues as well. So if you're pregnant, we shouldn't be smoking, we shouldn't be drinking. The big common one is fetal alcohol syndrome. So this is a condition resulting in mental and growth retardation. So you can see some physical features associated with FAS. So abnormally small eyes, upturned nose, a small or abnormally formed brain. You also have some degree of mental retardation and may show problems with attention span, learning, coordination, and behavior. So there are certain things that you can do to prevent disabilities and defects. And so that's why it's so widely practiced that pregnant women don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't do drugs, right? We can avoid a lot of problems from avoiding these teratogens. Sometimes, it can't be avoided, like the genetic effects, but these can be avoided. Smoking is not okay because it limits the nutrients that are received by the baby, which obviously results in lower birth weight. Heavy smoking can also have effects on the brain. Okay, so newborn babies. We talked about this a little bit in class. Some of you were like, ew, so gross. There's not a newborn baby that looks cute. Usually, fresh out the womb, not looking so hot, covered in a lot of stuff. But then usually a couple days after, they start looking a little bit better. There are ugly babies out there, but hopefully cute, Okay, newborn babies. So we're out of the womb, we're in the world, we're living life, okay? So newborns are born with a number of reflexes. So these are things that are unlearned, involuntary responses that occur automatically, right? So the baby just naturally does these in the presence of certain stimuli. So I would say this slide is probably your most important slide in this entire video, because when it comes to AP testing, usually when they talk about prenatal development or infancy, usually a reflex is always tested. So we really want to make sure that we know our different reflexes. And we'll watch a video in class so you can see these in action. But a rooting reflex, so this is the idea that the baby automatically turns their head when their cheek is touched. Okay, so the baby could be looking away, you could be touching the cheek, and then they turn towards the cheek, like where they're being touched, right? The sucking reflex, sucking anything that touches the lips. Okay, so you could put, your finger on the baby's lips and they'll begin to suck it. Okay, the startle reflex, it can also be called the Morrow reflex. This is when an infant flings their arms, fans their fingers, so like little jazz hands, and arches the back in response to a sudden noise. It's like, a startle. And then the Babinski is my favorite one. The toes fan out. When out edge? Okay, there's a typo there. The toes fan out when the edge of the sole of the foot is stroked. So you stroke the sole of the foot, the toes are going to kind of like fan out. So again, I would make sure that you know the reflexes, make sure you know the difference. They're pretty self-explanatory, but if you're going to get a multiple choice question on it, a lot of times it's based on reflexes. So all of these reflexes are lost after the first couple months of age and are replaced by more complex behaviors. Okay, so that's all we've got for our first video. Like I said, this is a small chunk of the development unit. We're not going to spend most of our time here, but make sure you know the reflexes, make sure you know the stages of pregnancy, make sure you know teratogens and what they can do. And our next video is going to be about childhood, so stay tuned.